And away we go. It's another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show. My name is Pete Sweeney. I'm the editor-in-chief of arrowheadpride.com, joined once again by my esteemed deputy editor, John Dixon. John, do you have any headache or head pain today at all?
No, I feel really badly, though.
I'm surprised by that since the sky is falling.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see what
See,
you got?
yeah,
You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
You got what I'm doing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Chiefs
I
ended
see
up.
what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for you and our great audience. The Chiefs lose to the Denver Broncos by a score of 24-9, and you would think that it was their 17th loss. By the way, that we've seen X and our comments this last night and this morning. We'll get into what happened in the loss and where the Chiefs go from here throughout the show. Want to tell you, if you leave a rating and review on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network on Apple iTunes, we will read it, but we have not had one for a couple weeks now. So the floor is wide open. If you read us or if you leave us a comment, a question, anything, we will get to it before we get into everything on the show. We, of course, will have our world famous Marinated takeaways today. I know that there are some Chiefs fans that are dying for some negativity. John and I can't always provide that for you, so we're bringing in Steve for a Marinated takeaway. He's perfect for that. Head coach Andy Reid did talk this morning. We'll get to the point spread. There's a trade rumor we'll get into. I was going to do it at the top of the show, but this player is not to the point where I think we need to lead off with any kind of breaking news, but we will get to a trade rumor that actually sees the Chiefs sending a receiver. Everyone wants a receiver. No, they are thinking about sending one of their receivers elsewhere. But let's start with Andy Reid. It is officially Germany week, coming off a really disappointing performance by Kansas City against the Denver Broncos. They get their first win against Kansas City since 2015. And there was a key play in this game, John, in which Sky Moore had what appeared to be on the broadcast, I think as we were all watching it, this golden opportunity late in the game on a fourth down play. Looked like he could have had a touchdown, and it was a drop. I mean, it really looked like a drop. But head coach Andy Reid, during the press conference this morning, went out of his way. This was under his own volition. He wasn't even really asked about this play precisely, but he went out of his way to talk about Sky Moore and maybe a problem with the officiating. Here's head coach Andy Reid.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we go through all that stuff. I would tell you, you look at Sky Moore. Sky Moore is going to take heat for dropping the ball. Well, when you look at it on tape, you see that his inside arm was dragged down, so away from the ball. So, listen, the officials are human. They do a good job. It's just, sometimes it's hard to see everything. That's a tough deal by angles and all that. But I would tell you the majority of the time they do a good job with all that.
Well, I went back and saw the play, and there is a pretty clear grab of his arm. There is a case to be made that perhaps he should have made the play anyway. But this is now the second time in recent memory that Andy Reid has been fearless in going after officials, and it's just not something that we have seen in previous seasons. And I got to think, even past the Sky Moore play in this game, I got to think there was even more frustration, and he chose to use this as an example. I know there's another clip going around about the Broncos being especially grabby on that late game interception. And so this is a different style, I think, for Andy Reid than we have seen in recent years.
Yeah, I'm kind of mad at him, frankly, for this bringing this up. This was going to be one of my Marinated takeaways because, I wanted to talk about this because it didn't seem to me that it looked to me from the broadcast video, and I hadn't yet had an opportunity to look at the All-22 until I realized I didn't need to. It appeared to me that the ball wasn't quite as on target as everybody was making it out to be. But I think that Reid's interpretation might be correct, that what I saw as a ball that was a little off target was Moore's hand or his arm, inside arm, being pulled down. It looked to me on one of the replays that I saw that the ball had come in a little bit on his inside arm, that it wasn't like it was I mean, it hit his hands. I agree. You can make
Mhm.
a good argument that he should have caught the ball anyway. I'm perfectly happy to go along with that. But I wanted to argue against the idea that this was a perfectly thrown ball that any fool could have caught. I don't think that's the case at all.
And I think in Kansas City, we're always extra, ultra, whatever you want to call it, cautious to criticize Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes could have made
Mhm.
another decision on fourth down there, whether it be to maybe do a check down or run. And look, Mahomes very much more than any NFL player maybe ever deserves the benefit of the doubt, right? You're going to try to really never blame him. But I think on that particular play, could have made another decision to at least extend the drive and see where you go from there. Not to be, and you get the Sky Moore non-call drop, whatever you want to call it, just another one of the many mistakes that the Chiefs made in this game to lose to the Denver Broncos. I know that going into the game, John, we have heard fans and analysts alike calling for the Chiefs to trade for a wide receiver. So coming off the loss, I asked Andy Reid whether after watching this game, he felt like the Chiefs had enough in the room. Here's Andy.
Listen, I do. It was a combination of things. It was one of those where we were kind of chasing, whether it was starting with me with a play call, whether it was the play that was called was okay, but we had a breakdown in protection, whether the protection was good and the play was good. We, receiver dropped the ball or we didn't make the right read, from our quarterback side, and or we were running a wrong route. So it was one of everything. So when I mentioned that last night about there were things that I hadn't seen before from this group who I have a lot of trust in, I saw things I hadn't seen before. So somewhere I didn't get that point across to the guys and my coaches. So we've got to make sure we do a better job there.
Another surprising moment. This is similar to the referee comments that we've been seeing lately from Andy Reid, because Andy Reid just doesn't go here at all. And in naming parts of the team that didn't live up to expectations in the game. And so like a 2 or 3 on the scale of like criticizing his own team is like a 10 for Andy Reid. And I think he went there
Yeah.
and he kind of said, my players didn't play well last night. He never even gets remotely close to there. So I just think and he was good with his answer there. I think the frustration is palpable. And it's one of those things, because you ask that question because you have to ask that question. Do you have enough in the room? You're never going to say, no, we need to go make a move, because you're not going to show your cards. But at the same time, I just think it was telling that he went as far as to say, like, I think we made a lot of mistakes in this game. It doesn't say necessarily anything about the room. I know people are going to kill me for this. I still think they have enough. Patrick Mahomes wakes up 3rd in the league in passing yards. I believe 5th in touchdowns, 7th in completion percentage. I look at last year, and the only difference, as I mentioned a million times, is Juju Smith-Schuster and Rashee Rice. And the Chiefs have noticed that now. Rashee Rice led wide receivers in snaps in last game. And I think this was that quicksand style game. It seems like Andy Reid felt like that as well, where nothing was going right. And one of those, what do they call it? Murphy's Law, John. Everything that can go wrong did go wrong. And that happens in the NFL. And the Chiefs do have it seems like a dud a year. And I'm more thinking like that. It for me, it's more of the dud thing than any sign of the wide receivers. However, I do understand that there is going to be annoyance with that take from me. I've seen it already. And I get it. I get it to an extent.
They're already mad at you for your opinion you hadn't even expressed yet. Okay, excellent. That's great,
Yeah,
Pete.
I just know. The number one rule of this game, John, know your audience. And I know my audience is annoyed by me still thinking that they have enough. I know that.
Well, I have to tell you, that was a world champion run-on sentence that Andy Reid gave us, going through all the problems they were chasing,
Right.
as he put it. And there were a lot of them. It's true that there was just a lot of stuff that went wrong. I have an itemized list here of the people who've received blame for this loss. Of course, Sky Moore is at the top of it, then Andy Reid, then Patrick Mahomes, Matt Nagy, Eric Bieniemy, because he's not there anymore. Apparently, that gives him cause to be blamed. Travis Kelce, for going to the World Series game on Friday night, Taylor Swift for not being at the game, and finally, my favorite, the 2-year-old kid who gave the Mahomes kid the flu. So, there's a lot of room for blame here. And I just want to make this clear that I'm willing to take the brunt of this. I'm the one who several times this week mentioned the winning streak and how the Chiefs were about to. I wrote this a number of times. I think every opportunity I had to mention the winning streak, I brought it up. And then later in the week, I started talking about Mahomes going 13-0 for the first time in NFL history. And everybody I talked to, I brought those things up.
Right.
I feel personally responsible for this loss. If it makes people better, you can just feel better. You can just put it on me. I'm willing to do that.
It did have this underlying feeling of trap game going into it. I had mentioned this, and we do the Arrowhead reports now every day where Steve and I get together during the days that the Chiefs are going to talk to the media, and it just felt like the Broncos had some more juice than they did 3 weeks ago, like a lot more. I don't even know why it felt that way. And you're playing in Denver. And, I've mentioned this in articles and other media opportunities that I've had. Like, this was the biggest game of the Broncos season. So the Chiefs needed to play clean football. I mean, we knew that going in. So when you have 5 turnovers, you're going to get what you're going to get. And it was a team that finally was able to break through. Like, I think there are some positives to a loss, especially as you're about to go into teams you have to beat, because again, and I'm trying to paint the glass half full thing here. Given a win of the Broncos, of course, in the division is not great, but they're not one of these teams that's going to be vying for the top of the AFC. You're about to play Miami. I know Philly is in between there, but you get Buffalo and Cincinnati. So maybe this terrible loss refocuses you, and you kind of get humbled by it, similar to what we saw week 1, and you're able to play these games in a fashion where you're a better team for it. And so we'll see what they can do as far as a bounce back moving forward. That was a question for Andy Reid today. How do you bounce back from a loss like that?
Yeah, Matt. Well, it's you said it. I mean, you've got to learn from it, and there's a couple of ways you can go about it. You can hang your head, or you can face the facts and try to get better. And so we've tried to go about it that way, make ourselves a better team. I don't know if that ties into the wins or losses after a bad game, but I mean, that's the way we approach it. We've got good players here and good coaches, and there's a small margin between winning and losing in this league. And so you got to stay on top of your game all the time, every minute of it. So you start with that, and then you go to the rest of it, things that we can learn from.
I wrote this in the newsletter, and I thought it was a big moment, in the course of this season, where Mahomes at the end of his presser was asked, how do you make sure that this doesn't snowball? And he just was definitive in saying it won't. And now you got to wait until Sunday morning here in Kansas City to see how the Chiefs respond. But I think when you are dealing with a loss of that magnitude, John, and you mentioned the streak is now over, you want to play as soon as possible. So the Chiefs fans get to wake up and instantly, hopefully you kind of bounce back in a way that you feel good against the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have a game out of the way by noon too. That'll be nice.
Yeah, no, tremendous. And speaking of Germany, the Chiefs, I know that there has been some talk about this. Chiefs are planning to go to Germany on Thursday evening. The Miami Dolphins are going today because they are feeling like there's an advantage, I believe, to getting acclimated to the time change. I think the Chiefs are looking at as, let's try to keep it as close to our routine as possible. I mean, there's nothing routine about having to travel and you have the time zone change. But here was Andy Reid's explanation for why the Chiefs are going on Thursday as opposed to the beginning of the week.
Yeah, everybody kind of does it a little different. We did this a couple of years ago when we went to London. I've done it before with other teams, and so I just it worked. So I've kind of stuck by it. We'll see how it goes. Anyways, that's I'm not sure there's any right or wrong way. I mean, teams have done it all different ways, but I've had success doing it this way.
Now, what he's referencing is that 45-10 win back in 2015 when Alex Smith was the quarterback. And I mean, you can make a case that this is a much more serious team that they're going up against. But Andy Reid did it one way the last time, and if you win and you're able to win by 35 points, I think there is something to why change that method to your madness.
I can see why Andy Reid would look at it that way, but in this comment, he puts out there something that I really like about Andy Reid is he recognizes he doesn't have all the answers all the time. And I always respect that in people. And Andy Reid is one of the people who really does it well. He'll say, well, this is the way I've always done it. It's been successful. I'm going to continue to do it that way because that's who I am. But hey, there's lots of ways to do it and other people do it different ways. And I love that. I love that attitude from Andy Reid. Always have.
Well, he's a man of routine, but he is someone who constantly reassesses, and that's why you've seen the longevity of him. I know that he did coach one franchise and then ended up moving, but to have so many years with the same franchise and do it twice, pretty impressive. There is always that shelf life in the NFL. There will be a day when Andy Reid won't be the head coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think his staying power is driven from sticking to the routine until he realizes like the routine needs to change, and then he makes those changes as he goes. Speaking of potential changes, the Chiefs could be making, John, as we were about to record, and Steve was just waiting for us all day. I mean, he was ready for us to go, and I couldn't do it because I kept having to write articles. But Richie James, this was a little bit surprising to me, just because I think the Chiefs are still trying to figure out their wide receiver room, and I thought he looked pretty good in preseason and training camp, and then at least at the beginning of the season. But Richie James his name's out there as a potential trade away candidate. You would think that this would be for like a day 3 pick, something like that. The Chiefs signed him during the offseason, had over 500 yards for the New York Giants last year, and they saw him as a returner. But then they were able to get Mecole Hardman back, who we know Dave Toub regards as one of the greatest returners he has ever coached. I know that's tough to say after his mishap yesterday and what it meant for the Broncos' chances of winning the game. But did it surprise you that Richie James is suddenly available from Kansas City, John?
Well, I think we've talked previously on the show about what happened to Richie James. Because he was he was a guy that we thought at the beginning of the season was going to be a significant contributor, and then he really wasn't. And then he got hurt, and he kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Nobody was asking Andy Reid how his injury was going, and there was a lot of unknown about that. I mean, it was an MCL injury, which theoretically could have had him out for the whole year. And so it would have been entirely reasonable for reporters to be asking Reid about it every week. What's going on with this guy? But nobody was even asking. And then Reid a few days ago actually volunteered a piece of information that he was close to coming back. So that means that they're getting ready to put him back on the roster long enough to trade him away, apparently. So the whole thing has been very odd. And but it's, of course, this is everybody's all worked up about trading for a wide receiver, and the Chiefs are actually talking about trading one away. So
early on here, we put up an article, and right now we have about 300 votes. 79% of Chiefs fans that read our website are saying yes, trade him away. They're done with Richie James. The best ability is availability, and he's been unavailable. Let's get into a greater conversation about the trade deadline, John, because this is coming up fast on Halloween. 3 p.m. Arrowhead time is the deadline here. And you look at the Chiefs wide receiver room. Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Rashee Rice, Mecole Hardman, Justin Watson, Kadarius Toney. We know that Richie James is on IR. Justin Ross is currently on the commissioner's exempt list, which means out of the Chiefs' hands right now, they cannot practice Justin Ross. They cannot play him in any game. So as of this moment, and we'll see if that changes in the future here, but as of this moment, there are 6 wide receivers on the roster. And I know it's been a big question, John, of what can the Chiefs really do when it comes to the wide receiver position. There is a desire, I think, from the fan base to have Kansas City go out and get a guy. And I'm going to throw it into your hands. How possibly is that even when you consider that the Chiefs don't have a ton of money when it comes to their salary cap?
Yeah, there's been some speculation about that, suggesting that the Chiefs might, have enough money in their cap space right now, and the potential to maybe do a restructure on, say, Travis Kelce's contract. But I just don't see this happening. I don't think Brett Veach wants to empty out the salary cap
Mhm.
at this point in the season to bring in another player who might just be a 9-game rental. I just
Yeah.
don't see that. Um, I also don't think it makes sense to raid Travis Kelce's contract for money to pay a player who would probably be a 9-game rental. Um, I have all the faith in the world in Travis Kelce, but if I'm running the Chiefs, I don't want to add another $2.5 million to his cap hit in each of the next 2 years, when he's going to be 35 and 36 years old. I just don't think that's a wise move. Even
Right.
if you think that Kelsey's going to be an effective player in those years, and I've got no reason to think he won't be. Um, and I suppose that sounds a little hypocritical, but I just think if you're smart, you don't have that huge cap hit on a player that's that age. I just don't see that happening.
The names
Now,
that you see, the names that you see out there, like, are Mike Evans. That cap
yeah,
hits 23 million. Even Hollywood Brown, 13
yeah,
million, right? Like Curtis Samuel, 13. Any of these guys that you want to mention, I just think are out of the realm, even if the Chiefs were to miraculously work on their cap and do it. And then I was like, all right, let me compile guys where like the cap hit is manageable. The one that really jumps out to me is Jerry Jeudy, who had a nice day against Kansas City. I just don't think Denver's trading him to the Chiefs. Like, why would they
yeah,
they do that? I mean, you could just tell yesterday just how badly they wanted. And I know that we saw it a few years ago where Orlando Brown ended up being the missing piece. I know that he's a very polarizing player. Where the Baltimore Ravens did it, that was surprising to me. I just don't think you're going to see that in the division. So if you take Judy out of that mix and you think about the realm of like, okay, who could cost you $2, $3, $4 million? KJ Osborne, are they really trading him? The Vikings with the Jefferson injury? I don't think so. Darnell Mooney, I don't know if Chicago would be willing to do that. Is he really better than anyone that the Chiefs currently have? Russell Gage, same thing. Paris Campbell, same thing. These are names that, like, I went through the list and I said, okay, these make sense. These are from teams that aren't really playing all that well. I think playoffs is probably a high hope, but at the same time, is there any fit that A, fits the salary cap space, and B, actually legitimately, like, look yourself in the mirror. Do any of those names really make you
right.
better?
Right.
I don't
Well, and look
think
at
so.
last year. Look at last year. The issue that people bring up about this is that it takes a little while for a receiver to get acclimatized in Reid's system. And just a year ago, we saw this. Kadarius Toney was not somebody who immediately came into the system and spent a lot of time. He made some impacts, of course. There were plays that they designed for him so they could work him in, and he did some things that were very exciting. But this was never a guy who got a lot of snaps for the Chiefs, and still doesn't, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can bring in a guy like this and spend a lot of money on him and have him make an impact. We've seen this. It's not likely to happen.
And I mentioned just the obsession about this. And, like, granted, would it be great to have a Mike Evans in here? Would it be great
Sure.
if the Chiefs
Yeah.
were able to get one of those big four in the draft? Like I've said a million times, they were trying to trade up and do. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So, like, as much as you desire one of those players, the reality is none of those guys are coming. Like, I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to make a move that is going to move the needle. It's going to be in the hands of Rashee Rice. And then, I go back to, and as I mentioned it a little bit earlier, Mahomes still top 3 in passing yards. I know that Travis Kelce has 500 of those, but you could see that Rice is getting better and better each week. I know that he had the drop. I'd probably be the first to admit he looked up field too fast. That happens when you're young. 10 games from now, maybe he's not doing that. Like, I look at, like, and this is not Rashee Rice right now. I look at Rashee Rice at the end of this season when he has
Hmm.
17 games under his belt.
Yeah.
That to me is going to be a better option than Juju Smith-Schuster was last year, because I just don't feel like he's as talented as a receiver, and he's got all these injury problems and that slow him down. We saw that he was basically on half a knee last year. And so I know that it's tough, I know that everyone wants instant gratitude in this game, and I get it. But if you compare the two receiver rosters from last year, and you just think about Rashee Rice as being a replacement from Juju Smith-Schuster, there is no difference in the room. MVS is around. Hardman is around. You still have Kadarius Toney around. Now you're just replacing Juju with Rice, and I don't know. I still feel, even after yesterday's disaster, that Rice by the end of the season is going to be a guy that Mahomes can trust and that he can win a championship with. Not a popular take, I know, but that's just, I still feel that way. I know it. And I think there are other reasons, as we'll get into after the break, for why the Chiefs lost this game. I know that we're zoning in on the offense, but there are definitely some other parts of this that I think the Chiefs could have been better in all capacity yesterday.
Well, I'll just make one point that I made to you before the show when we were talking about this. I think the main reason that the Chiefs won't make a move to get a wide receiver is that they've already done it.
Yeah.
I mean, they've made a trade with another team to bring in a wide receiver, and in a lot of ways, it was a very smart move. Mecole Hardman is the one guy who can come into Kansas City and know exactly what to do and have a significant impact on the team. And they gave up really not very much compensation to get him, and the contract is super favorable. It hardly cost him anything to put him on the roster. Yeah, he's going to make some mistakes, but that's the nature of catching punts, is that sometimes you're going to muff one. That's just the way it is. And it's terrible that it happened in that spot, but it's over now. There's nothing we can do about it. And screaming about Mecole Hardman isn't going to change the fact that whoever's out there is capable of muffing a punt.
The snaps ended up yesterday, Rice leading the way in the receiver room with 37, MVS at 35, Sky Moore 33. This was kind of surprising to me. I thought Hardman would be in a more limited role on offense, but he had 22, the same as Justin Watson with his bionic elbow thing. Tony was surprising of having 12. And if there is one thing that to me is of greater concern, if you trust me and you believe that I'm right here, I guess we'll see in about 24 hours, but that this is the group. It's like they've really, it seems, lost a little bit of faith in Kadarius Toney for one reason or another, unless there's some kind of injury management thing built in, whatever it is.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
12 snaps pops in the wide receiver room. Just considering all of the preseason hoopla that we all bought into, myself included here. I'm not saying I was free from this, but where we believe that Toney was going to be the guy this year, it just seems like we're a far cry from any of that energy, at this stage of the game.
Well, they may have just made a choice that it's better to have him available for a smaller amount of time every game than to have him available for a smaller amount of time by missing 5 games. You end up getting the same amount of snaps for him, but they're just every week instead of.
You can design special plays, maybe designed for him.
And have a guy that there isn't a lot of film on every week too.
Right. It is interesting. We'll continue to track those snap counts as we go here. And should the Chiefs make a trade, and I have, what do they call it? Egg on your face? I have a ton of egg on my face. I will wear that egg to an emergency podcast tomorrow here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Remains to be seen. When we come back, it is Marinated Takeaways. They're world famous, and Steve is going to join us. Stay with us. Back here on the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, and you hear the music, it's time for those world famous Marinated Takeaways, and you guys are especially hungry for them after they end up losing as opposed to winning. That I know, and probably even already throughout this show, you're sick of hearing John and I look at the bright side, so we're bringing in Mr. Rainy Day himself. Steve Serta is going to give us a dose of negativity. And Steve, let's actually start with your Marinated takeaway from this game.
Absolutely.
What upset you about the Chiefs' disaster in Denver?
I don't like that I'm the guy you bring in for this show to be negative about the Chiefs. I don't appreciate that.
We need that. We need some of that on the show.
I don't think that I'm overly negative about the Chiefs.
You are. Yeah, you
are. Yeah, I guess this is going to be pretty negative.
I'm stunned by that.
So I'm with you guys. I don't really envision them all of a sudden going from last week where it's like we see reports that they're good with what they got moving forward to now have one bad game and be like, okay, now we got to mortgage the future to bring in another wide receiver.
Right.
Like, I don't see the Chiefs making a big move for that, but I think what they can control moving forward offensively, because that's obviously where the issues really lie right now, is what Patrick Mahomes is seeing on the field. And I don't think, despite the fact that Patrick Mahomes is still, like statistically, like top 5 in virtually every category, he's still playing fine football for the most part. It's just that his standards have always been so much higher than everybody else. Patrick Mahomes needs to play better. Like, he just needs to let it rip. And we've talked for weeks now about, he's holding on to the ball way too long, despite the fact that he's got good protection. Guys aren't getting open downfield. Some of that is on Mahomes too. It's not just the wide receivers not getting open. It's Patrick Mahomes not trusting what he's seeing or holding on to the ball too long because he doesn't trust those guys are going to be in the spots that he's throwing the football, like we've seen him do in years past, where it's like he's got this mind meld thing going on with Travis Kelce. Like, Patrick Mahomes has been really unsure of himself this season, and they have to get better play out of him. Like, he's got to be more confident in the wide receivers. He's got to build more chemistry with them. And I don't think the offense is really going to make some kind of grand transition into playing better until Patrick Mahomes is out there playing more confidently. So my marinated takeaway is that Patrick Mahomes has to play better, and he's got to let it rip sometimes. Stop hanging on to the football.
I don't disagree with you. I also, I've said this to some friends, like, very quietly here, Mahomes is a touch worse this season. Now, it's a touch worse from very clearly the greatest player in the game, but I think he's fallen back to, being like just regular top 5, which is, what are we complaining about? We're complaining about this, grand luxury that the Chiefs have. But you're right. There has been a little bit more of that hesitation. Is it receivers getting open down the field? Is it just he's not as playing as well this year? There have been some like really silly mistakes from Mahomes that maybe we haven't seen in previous years, where the ball is just thrown up, and maybe that's some frustration with the way that the Chiefs are getting played defensively. But I've seen a little bit of that. I think everyone has like a little piece of this. Everybody needs to play better, offensive line, pass catchers included. And I don't think Mahomes is, again, completely innocent from what are the problems right now of the Chiefs offense. John, let's go to you for your first marinated takeaway.
I have to choose here. I want to expand on a point that Rocky Magana made in his 5 things we learned from the game. He was talking about Travis Kelce being held back by the Denver defense, and that he'd only had 6 catches for 58 yards. And of course, on the surface, that's like, oh my God, they stopped Travis Kelce cold. Well, no, not really. The thing that we have to get used to here is that Travis Kelce has a really high bar. If most tight ends in the league, if they had 6 catches for 58 yards, they'd be as happy as a clam. And even if you had averaged 58 yards a game, you would get just under 1,000 yards in a 17-game season. And if Travis Kelce has 58 yards for every game in the rest of the season, he's going to easily eclipse 1,000 yards because he already had 525 when this game began yesterday. So I think it's important for us to remember that Travis Kelce has a really high bar to clear every week. Right. And especially now that he's dating Taylor Swift, because apparently that makes a difference.
Yeah, and we've seen the stats. Taylor, like you said, Taylor's not innocent in this loss either. Travis Kelce plays better when she's in the stands. We've known it from the CBS stat, and so she is not without blame. Even if it's 1%, she deserves a little bit for the Chiefs' loss. My first marinated takeaway, it's going to be positive and negative about the defense. Positive, let's start with some happy stuff here. My God, did Brett Veach nail the first round of the 2022 NFL draft? Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis are studs, and they are looking like 2 of the better picks in that entire round. And to nail 2 of them, especially after years and years, I think, of Chiefs fans being upset with Brett Veach for not drafting players in the secondary or not taking a pass rusher. Like both of these guys look like the real deal, and good for Veach and that crew to nail somebody at 2 people really in the first round when it had seemed like for years and years they were just better on day 2 and day 3. So you saw in this game the impact that both of these guys can have. Those are players that you want to be forever Chiefs. I mean, I don't think they're going to decline or anything, even into their mid-20s. So I'm intrigued to see how that goes as we go, but still improving. And you're in year 2 now. Now the downside of this, and I said this on Twitter, the Broncos had 3 touchdowns. One of them started on the Kansas City 39. One of them started at midfield, and one of them started on the 9-yard line. The Chiefs' offense was not putting the defense into great positions. However, the Broncos, to an extent, ran all over the Chiefs. I mean, they really did. They were able to, once they got a lead, get first downs with the ball on the ground. Deontay Williams at times looked like he couldn't be stopped. Same thing with that short passing game that they were doing with McLaughlin. And I think it's worth wondering maybe how much the Chiefs might miss Nick Bolton in that regard. And that's fine when the offense is cooking, because the defense becomes, or the other offense becomes one-dimensional. But when the other offense has a lead and has the personnel to run it down your throats, is that going to be a liability for the Chiefs defense? And so that was a good thing with those studs that I talked about, but a little bit of a concern for me in a game where all we're talking about is how bad the offense was. Don't disagree. I just don't think the defense was completely guilty when it comes to innocent when it comes to the run game.
Well, they had 143 yards on the ground, I think, in this game. The vast majority of the yardage that they gained, and what was it, 3.8 yards, I think, per carry for the Broncos. And, we look at that and go, oh, well, the NFL average is 4.2 or 4.3 or whatever it is right now. So that's not very good. Nothing to write home about. But I'll tell you something. If you get 3.8 yards on every carry, you're going to get the first down and keep getting first downs.
And the time of possession, right, is overblown generally, right? Like that general point, unless you're in the middle of a game and the team has a lead, then it starts to become an advantage. Like then you can actually talk about it. It's just that the teams generally have a problem even getting a lead on the Chiefs. So that to me is overblown. Like, oh, they're trying to keep keeping Patrick Mahomes off the field works when you have a 5-point lead. Then that completely changes, and they were able to do that with the run game. So a little concerning there. And I think an under talked about part of this game coming out of it. Steve, let's go back to you for your second Marinated takeaway.
Well, I'm not going to let Andy Reid escape from all my negativity around.
Yeah, that's right. Here we go.
So the first one was Patrick Mahomes. This one is more on Andy Reid, and it's more really like, we talk about the Chiefs' offensive struggles this season, but then you look at a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, which they're 7-1. Obviously, AJ Brown is just playing absolutely out of his mind right now. But if you look pretty closely at the Eagles offensively, like their passing game has actually been pretty up and down this season, despite AJ Brown just going off for 6 straight games. Like he has been on another planet, but the rest of their passing game has kind of been inconsistent this season. And what the Eagles do when it is inconsistent and when they're struggling throwing the ball, they just run it down your throats. And they just say, we're just going to run it until you prove you can do something about it. And then they use that to open up the passing game and take those deep shots down the field like they like to do. I just wish, and I understand yesterday, everybody will say, well, the Chiefs were trailing in that game. They were turning the football over. That's why Isaiah Pacheco only winds up with 8 carries in yesterday's game. I just really wish when the Chiefs are struggling on offense, can we get a little bit of an Eagles game plan where it's like, okay, we don't have it today throwing the ball. We're just going to run it down your throat until you prove you can stop it. And then we're going to try to use that to open things up and make things easier on the pass catchers down the field. Like I just want to see Andy Reid do that. And it just doesn't seem like outside the Jets game, like he's willing to commit to it. And it's really frustrating because we know that the interior of this offensive line is excellent at it. And I feel like it would really help the offense move things along and open things up if he would just lean into the run game more. I just want to see him do what the Eagles do on a weekly basis.
It's a great point. And I've said for years that it always feels like the passing offense is even taking a little bit better when Pacheco's in that 15 to 20 range, that 12 to 15 range of carries. And in this season, it seems like he's even taking a further step as like being one of the better backs in the NFL. And so when you do look down on a game like yesterday where the Chiefs were unable to get in the end zone, it is frustrating to see 8 for 40. John talked about, what'd you talk about, John? 3.8? 8 for 40. Quick math. That's 5 yards of carry. That guy's got to be touching the ball a little bit more.
Right. I agree. And, it wasn't like it was a secret what the Broncos were doing. The first time they got the ball, they were at midfield and it took them 10 plays to score. I mean, that's the definition of a grinded out ground game. That's what I should call it. Grounded out grind game even. And to use that many plays to go such a short distance and chew up all that clock, it was obvious right from the beginning of the game that was going to be their strategy. Maybe somebody sitting upstairs looking down at the field should have whispered in Andy Reid's ear, look, we need to respond to this. If this is the game they're going to play, we need to do something about it.
I thought you were talking about God for a second. You mean one of the coordinators or something like that? Right?
Well, they've got people up there watching who are supposed to be above it all, not involved in the minutia of what's going on the sidelines to have a big, is Brad Childress still with the team doing that kind of thing?
He should be. Get Chili back. That's a great Marinated takeaway. I would love to see Chili back in the mix. John, do you have any other takeaways from this game that you want to mention?
Yeah, I do actually. Okay. And this doesn't really have anything to do with the Chiefs losing this game. I guess you could make an argument that it does, but there needs to be more separation between division games. I'm sorry. I just don't think this is the way that the NFL should do this, that you have a game against the same opponent 1 week away from the first one. Right. There's nothing about that that's entertaining. There's nothing about that that's fun. And I mean, if we're going to do that, why don't we just have them play the 2 games as a doubleheader?
Back to back.
If they're going to come to the second game and go, well, we figured out what to do in the last game, we're just going to do that again. You might as well do it in a doubleheader. You might as well just make it an 8-quarter game.
I don't completely disagree with that. And I also think like that cliche of, well, it's really tough to beat a team 3 times in 1 year. It's kind of the same thing when you play them 2 times within 3 weeks. Like I feel like these are still 2 NFL teams. I mean, it's going to be a lot easier. It's a lot easier to split that when you're playing and you can kind of make those slight adjustments because you just saw them 2 weeks ago than it is, when you face a team with a lot of weeks. Like you're going to see the Chiefs play the Chargers and they don't play them till January. They just played them. That's going to be 2 completely different game plans, 2 completely different teams. There'll be different development at different positions. There'll be injuries and whatnot. I don't disagree. I think the league could be better at that. This is going to be an unpopular take because it's super positive. I know Steve is going to hate it. This isn't the sky isn't. The sky isn't falling. I tweeted this out, and I'm going to reiterate it here because I know that not everyone is on the Twitter X thing. But this is a season where you have seen great teams drop games that they shouldn't have. Baltimore's lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baltimore's considered one of the contenders of the AFC now. The Bengals lost to the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is thinking about selling everything off tomorrow. Jacksonville lost to the Houston Texans. Buffalo lost to the New York Jets. These are all teams that are considered contenders and still. And I think sometimes, and a couple of those games that I just mentioned, they were division games. Division games are tougher. This streak against the Broncos wasn't going to last forever. And, I know right now we're all in freak out mode, but should the Chiefs be able to beat the Miami Dolphins, you're just going to be instantly feeling a lot better about this year. And here's another thing too, like the championship teams for the Chiefs had some adversity in the years that they lost they all every year had a couple losses. And so this is a time to refocus and we'll see if the Chiefs can bounce back now against the Dolphins. And I tend to think if they can, now you're feeling way confident again going into the bye week, which we know is really good for Andy Reid as they get ready for what would be a Super Bowl rematch on Monday Night Football.
It always amuses me when people talk about the Chiefs always, play down to one opponent every year and play this terrible team and lose to them. And it's so aggravating that this happens to Andy Reid's teams. Well, you know what? It happens to all teams. It's not just Andy Reid's teams that have this happen to them. This is what the NFL wants, is they want it to be possible for any team to beat any other team on any given Sunday. And it happens. Not very often, but it happens often enough that any
Like,
team
this
can
is
have
the
this happen to them.
It's the NFC, but just think about the Niners a couple weeks ago when they just smashed the Cowboys 42-10, and everyone
Yeah.
was just like, Super Bowl champs, stop the
Right.
count. Now they've got 3 losses in a row to Cleveland, Minnesota, and Cincinnati, and it's just
Yeah.
a completely different. And it's a week by week league, and we'll see what ends up happening. Now, key is going to be the Chiefs responding really quickly here, and so we'll see if they can do that. The trade deadline's tomorrow. We will have some coverage on arrowheadpride.com if ever anything happens with your Kansas City Chiefs. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, snap counts. We'll go over an injury that the Chiefs had in this game, and then current odds heading into Deutschland. That's Germany, for those keeping track at home. Stay with us. Back here on the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show, Pete Sweeney, John Dixon. Thank you for Steve Serta bringing some of those hot takes for us and marinated takeaways today. We talked about the wide receiver snap counts, John, so I might have stepped on your toes a little bit when it came to snap count takeaways. Anything else jump out to you when you take an initial look at the snap counts from this game?
Yeah, you did walk on my toes there, Pete.
Sorry about that.
Just watch yourself, buddy. Just watch yourself. Well, and we kind of touched on the running back situation as well. Just two snaps for Clyde Edwards-Helaire on Sunday's game. It's funny to me that people are always screaming for the Chiefs to get rid of him. Well, basically they have. He's playing a very, very small number of snaps in these games.
He's essentially Ronald Jones now, where he exists if there's an injury to a running back, which happened, by the way, all the time. So worth having him around in case of an injury. Not to say that he'd be able to pick up exactly what Isaiah Pacheco is doing, but I do think he, and this is probably a bad take too, but I do think he is better than like X running back off the street, like to me.
Oh boy. No, you're in trouble now, Pete.
Is that not? That's not a good take, I'm sure.
Everyone, that's at PG Sween.
Anything else snap count wise?
Yeah, all the linebackers played on defense yesterday, which we don't normally see because of Bolton being out. Leo Chanel had the most snaps of the season at 68%, and also played on 86% of the special team snaps. That fella got a lot of work in the game against Denver and did pretty well. And we kind of touched on these things too. The highest percentage of passing plays this season, 72%. That's the highest it's been at any point this season.
The Chiefs' offense is always bad when they do that.
Yeah,
it really always is. I know that a lot is game script, but that's a good point. Like, they're never as good passing the football when they're passing that much. They just aren't. So
right. And the Broncos ran the ball 62% of the time. That was also the highest percentage for an opponent this year to run the ball. So we saw extremes for both teams.
You know what? And a lot is made about Sean Payton, and that's going to be the difference between a Sean Payton and revolving door head coach that we've seen for years and years and years in Denver. Like, he'll change his game. Like, it probably was a surprise to Denver that they had the lead and had the lead so early and for so long. What do? They kept it. And how do they keep it? By doing something abnormal that they don't usually do, by running the ball down the opposing team's throats.
Well, they certainly, thought this would work against the Chiefs, and it did. Right. And you look back on it, and it sort of did the last time too. They just realized, okay, this was working. We need to tune it a little bit, and it'll work a little better. Finally, one other thing about plays that comes out of the snap counts analysis: it's the highest percentage of defensive plays out of the total snaps that the Chiefs have had all season. And that goes back to the point we were making about the Broncos grinding it out on the ground. Russell Wilson yesterday had a passer rating of 119 on 114 yards passing. So, he had 3 passing touchdowns, and passing touchdowns is a big chunk of passer ratings calculation. But it's not very often that you see a quarterback have so few yards and get such a good passer rating. So again, that was the way that Broncos were doing things, and it allowed Russell Wilson to have a good game, which he didn't have the last time these two teams played. So
I try to give every NFL player the benefit of the doubt. Man, there's something about Russell Wilson that does not want me to see him succeed. And so that's tough to hear, John. Thank you for delivering that news.
Well, you know what? I got some flack for mentioning in the pregame article that Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes were both top 10 in passer rating this year. And people were like, oh, no, that's, the Mahomes has much better statistics. Well, I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying that in passer rating, they were close. And that's significant,
Speaking of Peyton, like, I don't think he suddenly has reversed Russell Wilson into the champion of the Seattle Seahawks, but he's found a way to manage Russell Wilson to a point where they can win football games. They're very quietly here. They're 3-5. I mean, that's not like that's not like the season is completely over for them. So that was a big win for them yesterday. They go into their bye week. It'll be interesting to see what they do against the Buffalo Bills coming out. They got Minnesota, Cleveland, and Houston. All seemingly winnable games, so they can reverse it quick here. I tend to think they won't. I don't think they're going to make the postseason. As everyone is saying, they won their Super Bowl yesterday, but an interesting team to watch in the coming years. I do believe that Peyton can maybe reverse this thing from misery to actually being a team that competes sometimes.
Well, but if he does, that's going to involve making Russell Wilson an effective player in that offense, because they're stuck with him for a while. So I your opinion is going to lead to something you don't like. So sorry.
At least one more year. And then they'll probably have to move on. All right. Willie Gay Jr. came out of the game with a tailbone issue. That was the only injury Andy Reid mentioned. There were some cuts to Patrick Mahomes' hands. They seem less concerned about that. I believe, and we're learning on the fly here, international series is a little bit different as far as coverage. Again, the Chiefs are leaving on Thursday, so we won't even be in person for media on Friday, but we believe that the injury report is going to be normal. So we think we'll get the first one on Wednesday, and Willie Gay Jr. is the one to look out for. The Chiefs' depth at linebacker being tested here a little bit, and so you're not going to want to see Willie Gay out of this mix. One of the faster players, if not the fastest player, John, at the second level, and you're going into a game against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert. So Willie Gay is a important player to make sure that you have. So we'll watch the injury report on Wednesday. Speaking of that Dolphins game, John, what are the opening odds? I know you covered that for us this morning.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to me. There's been, as you noted, a lot of sky is falling takes that if the Chiefs can't beat the Broncos, who gave up 70 points to the Dolphins, there's no way the Chiefs can beat them. Well, you know what? The community of property doesn't actually work in NFL. That's been proven by mathematicians all over the planet. But the Chiefs are actually favored by 2.5 points in this game. Even after losing to the Broncos in such a stupendously bad fashion on Sunday, they are still the favorite in this game. Which in theory they're the visiting team, but of course in these international series games, both of them are visiting teams. It's just that one of them is designated as the home team. In this case, it's the Dolphins. But in the odds,
they look at it as neutral field, so it's the home and away thing doesn't even matter with these.
Right,
very interesting. I would have thought maybe it would be they call it a pick 'em, where it could be either team. I don't think. I think it's going to be a good game. I don't, for me as a bettor, this to me is a no touch. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen on Sunday. I think either team can win this football game.
Sure. Well, that's actually what's pretty much meant by a 2.5 point spread.
Yes. Usually when one of the teams is home, that's what it means. All right.
Yeah.
That's it for the Arrowhead Pride Editor Show. We mentioned it. I'll mention one more time. The trade deadline is tomorrow at 3 p.m. We'll have an article. Last year, I remember I put up an article that the Chiefs made no moves, and then all of a sudden, Rashad Fenton was an Atlanta Falcon, and I said,
I'd forgotten about that
right now. So I think I'll wait till 3:30 to put that article up this year. But we'll have all the updates at arrowheadpride.com. If the Chiefs do make a move, and I look dumb, I will be right here to tell you about it. Right here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network, we'll do an emergency podcast. I tend to think it's going to be relatively quiet, but we will see. Get us a rating and a review so we have something to read at the beginning of next week's Arrowhead Pride Editors Show. Keep it locked in at arrowheadpride.com and right here on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Thank you to Steve Serta for all of his wonderful negativity that we needed on a losing Monday like today. Thank you to John Dixon for both of them. My name is Pete Sweeney. Thank you for joining us on another edition of the Arrowhead Pride Editors Show.